when we look around in the world, there's a lot being created for the under 40s all the time. And there's a lot of action happening in the last decade or so for the comfort and life of 75 plus, right? So assisted living, caregiving, great strides. But then we were looking at it and we were like, 50 to 70 feels like a black box, a bit ignored. Maybe also because it's a very transitionary time in the individual's life. Women go through menopause, men go through retirement, and women go through retirement. Kids leave home, empty nesting happens. So there is a lot going on in that space where maybe it's a time of rediscovery even for the individual. And hence we feel like there's no attention paid to that group at all. The large differences that we are seeing in Generation Greytt, which is today's 50 to 70, which is different from, for example, my parents, who are now 75 plus, they're coming into this life stage with a lot of enthusiasm, energy, independence. So it's not, oh, I'm retired, life is done, kids are settled. No, it's not that. It's, this is my time. This is my time to do the things I never did, to reinvent myself, to live this life stage in the way that I want to. Because my responsibilities are kind of done. And it's like freedom time. So that's
it's
one
all
of
about me now. That's what it should be, right?
Absolutely. It's huge. We're seeing that in a lot of the consumer work that we're doing, right? So we did a Gen Greytt study across Singapore and Malaysia. 80% of this audience says that they're very optimistic about the next few decades that are coming their way.
That's amazing.
88% said they want to reinvent themselves, those very words. So very different group of people who are looking to live life to the fullest. And hence we feel that it's important to understand them for who they are. The biggest fight we have is to dispel the myths around what a 50 plus means.
Totally.
We still get asked the question, but can you reach them digitally? We're like, this is the group of people who bought the iPhone first when it came out.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I was in my 20s. I couldn't afford it.
Yeah, same. Exactly. I was in college
their
looking at the
40s.
iPhone. Wishing for the iPhone.
I want that.
Yeah. So I'm like, they are very digitally. They're probably the first generation that started using laptops at work.
Yeah.
That's our biggest fight. So I think it's important to understand them for who they really are and then say, okay, what is it that we can create that's of value to them?
I feel like when I was younger, 50 just felt like it was so old. Like fucking hell. When I'm 50, I don't know, I'm going to be wearing those cardigans with like a low bun. Like that kind of
That's a very
image.
British 50.
It is a very
I love
British
it.
50.
Like
That
sipping
image is
tea.
never going away, Jasmin.
But now you look at 50-year-olds and I'm seeing like I've got some cousins who are 50 and they are fucking cool. And I'm like, oh my God, you look amazing. And obviously the older we're getting, we're in our 40s.
Yes.
It's like 50
Delicately.
is not old. 50 is like, oh my God, I can't wait until I'm 50. I can't wait to be doing shit that makes me feel amazing. Like I can just imagine Amanda, when you're 50, you're going to be on the pull-up bar.
I'm just saying I might be a competitor in the CrossFit Games when I'm 50. Maybe that's the age where I can actually make it.
High Rocks has a above 50 segment.
Love it.
Which two
Masters.
of my friends are competing in. And they're like, by the way, it's a great segment to compete in because there are only 4 participants.
Yes.
Whichever way you look at it, you will win.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking on, right? The older you get, the better you get in a lot of ways, just because of the competition things. So what are some misconceptions? So you shared the one about, this Generation Greytt can't use digital, can't use tech.
Yeah.
What are some other misconceptions that people have about that age group?
The other big one is, and I'll talk to some of the areas that we've deep dived into, right? Because that's where we wanted to build services for them. So the fact that everybody thinks 50 plus means they'll be doing tour group travel.
On a
Actually,
bus.
tour group travel is what I mean. Not true, because this is a bunch of people who've done DIY travel all their lives. Their habits are not going to flip just because they turned a certain age, right? So that's the other big one. They're ready to sort of hang up their boots in the very old sense of retirement. But that's not true either. A lot of people do kind of want to walk out of the 9 to 5-ish corporate sector work. They do want to continue contributing in some way, to be professionally engaged, to keep using their experience in meaningful ways. At this point, it's not easy to figure out what that means, right, for everybody out there. From everybody we've spoken to and the studies we've done, more than 70% are like, I'd like to keep working. In fact, even for financial reasons, because we're all going to live longer. So we are planning for another 3 decades of life or more, unlike before where, you retire at 50 and by 65 or 70, life is over. That's not going to happen anymore. So they're like, even for financial reasons, but mostly for purpose, to feel connected, to feel relevant. That's what they're looking for.
I remember reading an article somewhere about how when you're in your 20s and 30s, you are basically striving for like building a career, right? So like achieving a skill or a promotion or the next level career, right? And then by the time you get in your 40s and 50s, it's about teaching or synthesizing information or bringing expertise to the next generation. Is that something that you still see with Generation Greytt, that they want to kind of bring up those behind them?
Some of them see it as bringing up behind them.
Yeah.
Some of them just, I feel, see it, Amanda, as I still have a lot to give.
Yeah,
so can I keep giving in some way? Whether that necessarily translates into mentoring or teaching, maybe not. I think it's very personal how somebody wants to do it. But a consulting gig or even lending their very professional services to, non-profit organizations, that would work too. And yes, some of them have the ambition of saying, how can my experience help the next set of people who need to run businesses or run the world or enter politics, etc.
And I mean, our audience generally, not to say all, but lots of our audience is not quite in their 50s yet. So they're kind of looking at Generation Greytt from, the future. And what type of seed planting do you think women in their 40s need to really consider? So obviously us here in the wellness industry, right? I'm always harping on, you have to get your muscle mass up in your, as young as you can. You have to get your nutrition habits sorted. You got to get your sleep sorted, because these things will come back to haunt you in your older age. How do you encourage folks that are not yet in Generation Greytt to kind of prepare for Generation Greytt?
So I'm 45, Amanda. So I have just that little bit of a ringside view to what it will mean. And interestingly, the 40s were a big time of change, because the moment I flipped to 41, my perimenopause started. So there was a lot going on there, From a wellness perspective, to your point, I think everything you've said, I can't say it better. You guys are the experts. But I think a couple of other things that I've seen my friends, my peers work towards, I think it's important to figure out what does purpose mean? And that could mean very different things for different people. Just because I think that transition from the 40s to 50s with kids growing up for most people, or full-time jobs becoming maybe a little bit less priority, means that there is a search for relevance and purpose that comes up front. I think that search for purpose has to be done with intent. The idea is not to find what you want to do tomorrow. You may just say, I don't want to do anything, or I want to continue doing what I was doing and I'm fine, or find something else. But I think the intent to find purpose and relevance needs to exist. Otherwise, sometimes the 50s might creep up on us, and then you're like, what's going on? What is my life about? And that can be very, very unnerving for anybody in general, but women, I think, in particular, because the 40s are busy. The 40s are so busy for women. And then you hit that point where you have all this time on your hands maybe, and they're like, okay, now it's about me. So what do I want?